Good evening, everyone. This is the April 21st, 2020 Board of School Directors meeting for Boyertown Area School District. Once again, I would like to remind our viewers that if you are using phone controls for participants, the following commands can be entered. *6 will toggle mute and unmute. *9 to raise your hand. The raise your hand feature in this webinar allows attendees to raise their hands to indicate they need something, or if there's a question that needs to be addressed. A procedure that was added to this to follow our policy for meetings under policy 006. The meeting was advertised requesting those who desire to speak at this meeting to do so by signing up in advance, like we would do when we had a brick and mortar meeting. The two mechanisms that were made available to sign up in advance for public speaking comment was to dial the number listed in the advertisement with the number 369-7408, or to send an email to the communications and marketing specialist at communications@boyertownasd.org. At this time, I was informed by the communications staff member that we had not received any requests to speak. So at this point, I would turn it over to the board president and secretary for a roll call and to begin the meeting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bedden. So we'll go ahead and we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with a roll call vote.
Ms. Hogan?
Present.
Mrs. Denon?
Here.
Mr. Brophy?
Here.
Ms. Neiman?
Here.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Here.
Mr. Optigrove? I did not see Mr. Optigrove, and I am not hearing him. Mr. Hemingway?
I'm here.
Ms. Deeroff?
Here.
Mr. Foose?
Here. All right, with that, we will move to a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, first we have announcement of previous executive session. So the school board met on April 17th for 1 hour to discuss personnel and legal matters. The next item we have is public comment, the first public comment. And as Dr. Bedden had just explained, we did not have anybody signed up for public comment this evening. So we'll move to the approval of the minutes from the April 7th meeting. Do we have a motion?
McWhorter moves.
Ms. McWhorter moves.
Denon seconds.
Ms. Denon seconds. We'll move to the vote. Or, sorry, does anybody have any comments or questions on those minutes?
Nope.
I'm not hearing any. So we'll move to the vote.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mrs. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Neiman?
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
All right, the next item we have is the president's report. I do not have a report this evening. So move to the secretary's report.
No report.
Next is the solicitor's report.
No report.
And now we are at the superintendent's report and the consent agenda.
No, no superintendent's report. For the consent agenda, we have, actually, Mr. President, we may need to, oh, it's been taken care of, I'm sorry. For the superintendent's report for consent agenda, we have the middle school west additions and renovations change order. That change order process was discussed at the committee meeting. We also have for the board the revised calendar that was put in place to make adjustments for the situations that are impacted by COVID-19. We do still end on the same date as originally scheduled for this academic year. So there is no extension to the school year. Item number C is a fall sports and first aid supplies and bids, which we continue to and must move forward with anticipation of school being open, which we don't know, but we still need to be prepared as usual. Item D is bid awards for supplies for the 2020-2021 school year. At this point, I would like to request approval of the consent agenda as presented to the board.
All right, do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
Hogan moves. Hogan seconds.
Okay, Ms. Denon moved, Ms. Hogan seconds. So since this is the consent agenda, we'll move to the roll call.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
The next item is the itemized agenda.
Moving to the itemized agenda, the BCIU is awaiting a appointment of Boyertown Area School District's board member who will represent our district on their board. As the item points out, that this position was previously held by Mrs. Denon. So either today or at some point in the near future, we need to be submitting a name to represent Boyertown Area School District for the BCIU.
All right. So for this particular item, I believe, so Ms. Denon is currently serving in this capacity, but this is something that requires board approval. So if anybody has an interest, they'd like to be considered or nominated for this, we could do that at this time. Or if folks want more time, Ms. Denon, do you know when the term is actually up?
I think we were supposed to be voted on at the upcoming IU conference, so it probably should have been done a little bit ago. And I think the conference was supposed to be this month, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe at the beginning of May. I actually completely forgot about this until I got a call this week from Dr. Jill Hackman, and she asked me if I would be willing to serve again, and I said sure. I didn't realize that the term was up. So she had indicated she was hoping I would be willing to serve because of the unfortunate circumstances with COVID-19, they're trying to keep, I think, the same people. Just to give a little background for new board members, I think it's important that people understand, because I talked to a couple of people, they don't totally understand what the IU does. So basically, the IU intermediate units, so BCIU stands for Berks County Intermediate Unit, and the Berks County Intermediate Unit they were mandated in 1970 to be a service provider to school districts. So each IU consists of regional schools. Our IU actually consists of 18 schools from the Berks County, all 18 Berks County school districts. Each school district appoints one of their board members to serve on the IU board. I actually replaced one of our board members who had resigned several years ago. And so basically what the IU does is the IU serves as a service provider, and they provide guidance and support to all 18 school districts. So for example, we participate in the IU with their help in curriculum development, in professional learning. We work with the IU on our Berks online learning. We will sometimes use their services to buy things in bulk, so the IU has a greater purchasing power. So it was meant not only to provide services to the district, but it was also meant to be more economical to school districts. So each individual school district wasn't repeating services. We also use the intermediate unit sometimes for special ed services, and I already said the buying services, and sometimes administrative services as well. So we've used the services of the Berks County IU to do superintendent searches. We have done that in the past. Someone had asked about what the budget is. Overall, the budget for the IU is about $165 million, but the contributing school districts, that budget is a separate budget, and it's about $2 million. And if everyone remembers, we did approve the 2020-2021 IU budget, I think it was last month, maybe the month before, and our amount is about $100,490 something thousand dollars, and the budget is the same as this year as it was for the 1920 school year. So the board did approve that. I had told Dr. Hackman that I would be willing to serve again, but I did alert her to the fact that it had to be a board decision. And so, it's up to the board at this point then. But I'm happy to answer any other questions about what the duties and responsibilities are. We do meet once a month. I guess that's important to say. It's very, very similar to our board meetings. There's 18 people. We ratify purchasing budgets, do evaluation of the executive director, those types of things. And then in addition to that, I do serve on something called the Council of Legislative Action, and it's a group of, it's all the superintendents, and then a representative from the board, and we work on legislative priorities for our school districts. So that's kind of a little additional thing. You don't have to be part of COLA to serve on the IU.
Thank you for that explanation about the position.
Sure.
So at this time, we weren't clear whether this required board approval or was an appointment, and that was clarified today. So that being said, I'd like to open it up for nomination if anybody is interested. And I'd like to nominate Ms. Denon to continue serving in this role, because I believe continuity is as important as we see continuity right now. I believe the IU has expressed the same. But if there are any other nominations, now would be the time.
Brandon, my hand's up.
Yes, Mr. Hemingway.
All right, you beat me to it. I was actually going to say the same that you said, in order to keep continuity in the in the IU board, especially now. And the time that Jill does already have invested, I would recommend that she continue as our representative. So I guess that would be, is that a second to your first?
No, it is not. There's
Okay.
no second to nominations. It would be a motion to close the nominations would be in order, which would require a second.
I have my hand up before him.
Okay, yeah, I see. So I see, I switched over to the participants pane and I see Ms. Neiman and Ms. Deeroff just expressed that she's also would like to be in the queue. So we'll go in that order.
Mr. Uppergrove is trying to get on, but he's having problems.
It looks like.
Mr. Updegrove, I'm looking at him. He's on.
Yeah,
Oh,
I see him.
okay, because he was having problems.
I'm on now.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Neiman, was there anything else, or should we go to Mrs. Deeroff?
Go to Ms. Steeroff because I just want to let everybody know Roger was trying to get on.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Deeroff.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Lisa Hogan.
All right.
I would like to second it.
All right, so we have a nomination for Ms. Denon, a nomination for Ms. Hogan.
Now a motion to close nominations would be in order.
Right.
Move to close the nominations.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so motion from Ms. McWhirter, second from Mr. Hemingway. So do we have discussion or do we just move to a vote?
Just move to a vote.
All right, I would.
Yep. I'm trying to put my hand up. It's not working. Brophy here.
Okay, Mr. Brophy.
I guess what I'd like to ask is what's Mrs. Hogan's thought on being nominated?
Yeah, that's probably an important point. Ms. Hogan, do you have any comments about your interest?
So one, thank you everyone for nominating me. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your vote of confidence in me. I do think at this time that Mrs. Denon is the better choice just because of what we had talked about, what Mr. Hemingway and Mr. Fusa talked about, the continuity, especially during this time. And with her knowledge of the legislature, I think that actually brings an added piece to the job. So I appreciate it, but I think she's the better choice. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. It's useful before we vote on your nomination. So are there any
Mr.
other?
Foose?
Yes.
Does that mean Mrs. Hogan would like to have her name withdrawn from the nomination?
Yes, you can withdraw my name. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Sultanic, does that require any type of motion or are we fine to just say that she's withdrawing?
The people who did the motion and the second to close would have to agree to withdraw to the withdrawal of Ms. Hogan's nomination.
Okay.
So that would be McWhorter, and I agree to that.
I'm fine with moving ahead and not removing my nomination if you want to do that as well. Whatever is easiest is fine with me.
All right. So I believe Ms. McWhorter said that she'd be fine with taking the name off. Mr. Hemingway, I believe, was the second. Mr. Hemingway, are you comfortable with taking Ms. Hogan's name out of contention?
Yes.
Okay. So then we'll move to the vote with just Ms. Denon.
Okay.
So roll call vote, please.
Ms. Hogan,
I vote for Ms. Denon.
Mrs. Denon,
I vote for myself.
Mr. Brophy, Mr. Brophy,
Yes, Mrs. Denon.
okay. Ms. Neiman,
No.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Denon.
Mr. Updegrove?
Mr. Updegrove, you're unmuted now. You can speak.
No.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
No.
Mr. Foos?
Denon.
6 votes for Mrs. Denon.
All right, Dr. Bedden, I believe we're ready for the next item.
Item number B is appointment of the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. As you know, Mr. Stout was throughout the interview process and selection to replace Dr. Melissa Woodard, who left to go to Why Missing, moved into that role. Mr. Stout was in a program completing his superintendent's licensure program to receive his letter of eligibility. At that time, his title could only be, as we put, Assistant to the Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. On March 26, 2019, the board voted unanimously to approve the following motion, which at the time stated that the Board of School Directors approves the appointment of Mr. Stout as Assistant to the Superintendent for Academics, and upon receipt of the letter of eligibility, he will be appointed Assistant Superintendent for Academics, which of course we labeled as Teaching and Learning. So this was a unanimous vote that was approved once he received his credentials. Mr. Stout did complete his credentials earlier this year, but was understood, as we said, that it would not be changed until the next academic year. So at this time, we brought forward for the board to approve his appointment and the contract draft that you received by email, and the final one that was attached to the board agenda, which was reviewed and sent back with appropriate corrections by board legal counsel. So we request the approval of item B for Mr. Stouts to move to officially the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning position.
All right, do we have a motion to take this up?
Hogan motions.
Ms. Hogan motions. Do we have a second?
McWhorter seconds.
Ms. McWhorter seconds. Any comments on this item? All right, I didn't see any hands up this time. Oh, sorry, Ms. Denon.
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate Mr. Stout on receiving his superintendency. So well deserved, and happy you were able to complete that. That's awesome.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other hands up right now, so we'll move to the vote.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mrs. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Neiman?
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
Yes.
Mr. Foos?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving to item number C is approval of the bids for phase 2 of the Adam project. This is finally moving forward for approval to authorize the bids that came in under budget. The board did receive 2 significant pieces of additional information, or possibly 1. The first one is we did send a suggestion, given our financial status, that the board may want to speak to before taking a vote to give administration guidance. And then the second one was we received notification that the governor intends to authorize construction projects beginning May 8th. We will wait to see what that looks like and then consult with the solicitor once that information is released to determine if this project meets the merits for that green light, which of course, if it does, would allow us to move ahead with beginning the work to complete phase 2 of the Adam project. But again, we do not know what that will look like at this point, but once it is released of what those criteria are, we will, again, like we did earlier, review that information with our legal counsel, and then also discuss it as a leadership team with regards to our ability to successfully meet whatever standards that may come forward if it does meet the legal standard to proceed. With that said, Mr. President, there may be some conversation about this based on board conversation previously and also what leadership team sent out to the board earlier today. I don't know if Carol, you have anything to say before the board chimes in?
I would, and I really believe in the committee procedure and having your discussion primarily at committee so that when you get to the voting, it's finalized. And I apologize for this with everything that has been moving so quickly after our finance committee meeting and a lot of reflection and the information that we received that we actually can use unused.
It's so tiny, I can't read it.
Unused funds to pay a portion of our debt. And that at this point with the difficulty in the budget of 2021, having the ability to use all of the tools in our toolbox. One of the options is that the maintenance building was a deduct alternate, and that would give us the ability, if we were to move forward, to take the maintenance building off the plate. And it hurts me to do that. There was a lot of hard work that went into this procedure, a lot of thought. We know it's important to provide a safe working place for all of our employees. But I think that these extraordinary circumstances give us pause to consider this, since it is an option. That would free up, and it's not going to be an exact number, but approximately $500,000 out of the Adam Fund that we could use a portion of that. I would not recommend all of it until the project is complete and we know everything that needs to be available, but I use a portion of that for debt service. I have consulted bond counsel about that, and I've also been in conversation with Mr. Remig. It would require a resolution by the board to authorize the use of those funds, because the use of those funds was designated for construction projects. So it's a multi-step process, but I feel that this is an important thing to consider to help us address our budgetary shortfall in the 2021 fiscal year. So I hope I've given enough information to the board and to the public.
All right, thank you. So based on the on what we're being told right now, should I guess we need a motion for this, and then would we need to amend the item if we wanted to include a discussion of that specific item, the maintenance building, or is that something you're proposing for a future discussion?
I was hoping that we could amend that resolution tonight and approve the bids with the alternate, the deduct alternate.
Okay. Mr. Sultanic, are we able to accept the bid or the nomination with the motion as with that, or do we need to do the original motion first?
Well, you could secure an agreement between the individual who made the motion and the second to
We
make
haven't had one yet.
or you could do a motion to amend.
Okay, so does anybody want to motion this item?
Just a kind of a point of order question, I guess, Mr. Sultanic. Should we go with the motions first, or should we have a discussion about whether we want to put this in as an amendment to the motion?
My suggestion is,
Discussing?
yeah, I think what would be the best is to move and second to the motion as presented in the agenda, and then see if there's a consensus to move forward with an amendment, either through consent of the person who made the motion or the second, or an amendment.
Okay, I'll move then.
Okay, so Denon moves. And it sounded like,
Hogan seconds.
I think I heard Mr. Hemingway first for a second on that. All right, so that's the original motion. And then so is it fine for me to offer an amendment to that?
Well, it's not, we're not offering an amendment. I think the question is whether or not you are agreeing with the recommendation of your chief financial officer to consider the amendment as she has stated it.
Okay, so we'll begin the discussion there. All right, does anybody have any comments on the original motion and what was just described to us by administration?
I had my hand up, Mr. Foose, too.
Okay. I'm just navigating over to the participant pane. So I have Ms. Denon followed by Ms. McWhorter in the queue.
Thanks. So Mrs. Pitts and I had several conversations about this prior to our facilities meeting. And then after, when I saw the change that was recommended. And I just want to clarify that I know that we had a very lengthy discussion last time about the maintenance building and the importance of the maintenance building. That was also before we got legal advice that we could move that money to paying off some of our bond issue. So the big issue for me personally with this maintenance building is that I wasn't willing to take it off if we were just going to be having the money used for another budgeted item where we wouldn't save additional funds. But because of the fact that our budget is going to be so decimated by this COVID, and we don't know, no one knows what the final budget and what the final revenues are going to look like, I think it is really prudent, and I applaud Mrs. Pitts. I know how difficult it was to make the recommendation, but I do agree that now that we can move some of that money to pay off the bonds, and we can legally do that with a board vote, I think that it is the prudent thing to do at this point. And I also think it provides us with a little bit of breathing room in case things become much, much worse. And hopefully a year or two from now, things will be better, and it wouldn't be the optimum solution, but we could revisit building the maintenance, that maintenance building down the road. I just feel really strongly at this point that we want to put as much money aside as possible so we can address our teaching and learning first and make that our priority. So I would agree with the recommendation of the administration. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And next we have Ms. McWhorter. And then I have Mr. Hemingway after that.
Yes, so thank you. I'm glad that we were able to get the appropriate counsel with the different questions that various people asked. I appreciate that, because I didn't understand that whole scenario at the time. I think it's wise to, now this will pay down our debt a little bit. Is that correct, Mrs. Pitts?
What this will do, it will give us the ability to use some of the funds in the Adam Fund to pay a portion. I mean, we have to have the resolution approved by the board to change or to authorize that use of the funds. But to use a portion of the remaining funds, and if we go with a negative deduct change order, we will have available funds to use that toward paying our portion of our debt service in the 2020-2021 budget, which will help address our large deficit that we saw last week. So like I said, it's one of the tools in our toolbox right now for the short term.
All right, thank you. And what kind of impact will that have on our payment over or our debt service over the 2020-2021 school year budget?
The total debt service that we pay will remain the same. Just a portion of it will come from the Adam Construction Fund, and the remainder will come out of our general fund budget. So we'll pay the exact same amount. It won't change the schedule of the repayment. It's just the source of the funds.
Okay, thank you. And I support, as much as I would love to see that maintenance building done, I think it's better right now to be more conservative with our money.
All right, thank you. And
I have my
next,
hand up.
all right, next I have Mr. Hemingway and then Ms. Deeroff.
Okay, I just want to say, I do understand the importance of the building. It's something that I was really for. But we're in some heavy seas, I understand that. And I also have to trust Mrs. Pitt's hard work and recommendations and try to, we have to follow her lead. It's our job, I believe, to support her recommendation. So I'm all for finishing this project, but as far as the maintenance building goes, I think perhaps we need to explore that down the line and get out of these rough waters first.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hemingway. Now I have Ms. Deeroff.
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody because this is something I said over a month ago and nobody agreed with me. So I'm glad that this came up again and that things are changing. Thank you.
Mr. Foose, I can't put my hand up again.
All right, Mr. Brophy, you're up.
Okay. First, Ms. Spitz, I'd like to thank you for the work in getting with Mr. Sultanic on this. I know this wasn't easy. This is not an easy decision for us either. Stopping parts of a project is something we try not to do. However, I agree. I believe that you're doing the best thing here for the district in working with Mr. Sultanic and getting the money to the right place so we can more or less balance or do more to balance our books through this year, which is going to be extremely difficult on us and on our taxpayers. Thanks.
I do, if I may, Mr. President, I do want to make one point too. Just there have been some associated permitting costs with that building, which unfortunately we are not going to be able to recoup. But we are going to avoid I think it's $822,500 of the cost of the maintenance building from the construction contractors.
Okay. Just a quick question. Did we pay for the design of that already too?
Yes, we did.
Okay, we obviously have to pay for that.
Yes, and I did talk to Mr. Clough today as well, and he did say that we will own those plans.
Perfect.
So we do have that.
Okay, thank you very much. Good, thanks. Thanks for looking into that.
Yeah, I think those were some important clarifications. I don't see anybody else's hand up. I'll weigh in much the same as my colleagues who have already spoken. This has been discussed over quite some time, and the fact that administration is making the recommendation that they are at this time, I think, is evidence of how serious and dire the situation is. So I appreciate them thoroughly investigating that and bringing this to us. So again, I'd like to ask Mr. Sultanic. So at this point, it sounds we've had some input. Do we look for an amended motion, or do we move forward with the administration's recommendation? Is that what we're voting on?
What I'm suggesting is whoever made the motion and whoever made the second agree to the amendment as articulated by Ms. Pitts, and that the district would be authorized, the district and the solicitor would be authorized to develop any documents that need to be filed to reflect that particular understanding. And Ms. will then work with the Ellen Enters and our public finance group to prepare whatever documents that are necessary.
All right, Ms. Pitts, do you have who made the motion and second?
Yes, Mrs. Denon made the motion and Mr. Hemingway made the second.
All right,
So
so
they would-
both, sorry, go ahead.
Mrs. Denon and Mr. Hemingway would have to agree to that change.
I would
I
agree.
agree.
I would agree to that change.
I heard Mr. Hemingway also agree.
Yes, yep.
So now it would be appropriate for a roll call vote.
All right, Ms. Hogan,
We're voting on the change, correct?
voting on the change with the deduct alternate, yes.
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 Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving on to the next item. Item number D is a ratification of the independent contractor agreement between BASD and the Foundation of Boyertown. The Boyertown Area School District Pre-K Counts program is entirely grant funded. The school district works collaboratively with the Foundation for Boyertown Education to provide support for the district's pre-K counts grant and program management to ensure that the grant standards and guidelines are met. And as the board is aware, the commitment both at the state level and at the local level is for us to offer a strong pre-K program in addition to our normal K-12 program, and that has also been highlighted by the governor in all of the communication related to teaching and learning during the COVID-19 crisis. So at this time, we would request that the board ratify the independent contractor agreement between Boyertown Area School District and the Foundation of Boyertown Education.
Right. Do we have a motion?
McWhorter moves.
Ms.
I
McWhorter.
second the motion.
Second by Mr. Updegrove. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this item?
I have my hand up.
All right, Ms. Deeroff?
I just want to know, was there a problem that we're getting this so late, or we just forgot to get it approved?
Mrs. Deeroff, that's a great question. We did not get it approved in a timely manner last year, and I take full responsibility in that.
No, I meant there's no problem though.
No, there's no problem.
Everything's like always.
Yep, and what was articulated is that we will be looking at a renewal in August again for the upcoming school year, because our pre-K budget and our pre-K continuation grant was approved already. As long as the state budget is globally approved, we were approved for our pre-K program to move forward.
Okay, I didn't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure there was something I wasn't missing.
It was
Thank you so much.
a procedural thing that we did not continue with.
Thank you so much.
All right, I see Ms. Neiman has her hand up.
Is this something that could, the governor could take away from us?
Typically, what I was told in the beginning part of the grant that there have been very few pre-K programs across the state that have been taken away. What has been happening is the programs have been expanding across the state. So I say that, but with everything happening in the world today with budgets and whatnot, like I stated, we are approved by the grant to move forward, and our budget was approved for next year. If the state grant would fall through and for some reason they would take money away from the pre-K programming across the Commonwealth, there's a possibility that they would pull back on programs, but that would be a whole different step and a whole different criteria that we would be looking at. And the agreement that has been written the way it is very contingent on the grant itself from the state.
So if it would get taken away, we would not have to go through with it then. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that I just want to make sure of that
And-
because
And
right
like,
now, you don't know.
yeah, and like it states in the agreement, the pre-K grant is fully funded, so there is no money coming out of the district budget.
Right, I understand that, but in case Governor Wolf would take it back, we are not obligated to it then.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to verify that. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I didn't see any other hands up at this time, so we'll move to the vote.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes,
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes,
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving on to item number E. At the April 14th Finance Facilities and Operations Committee meeting, Brad Remick did a presentation to the board regarding refinancing of the district's series of 2014 and series of 2015 general obligations bond. The committee did forward and approve for the following resolution for the agenda to be approved as listed. At this time, the administration recommendation is that the Board of School Directors approve the resolution authorizing administration to proceed with the refinancing of the district's outstanding general obligations bond series of 2014 and the general obligations bond series of 2015.
I'll make a motion.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hemingway,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Brophy. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this authorization to proceed with refinancing? All right, I'm in the participants pane. I don't see any hands up. Is anybody looking to get in? All right, hearing none, we'll move to a vote.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
yes,
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
yes,
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving on to item F, the approval of the memorandum of understanding between Boyertown Area School District and the Boyertown Area Education Association. Under the district's current medical plan design offered to our employees, telemedicine services were not currently being provided. With the current COVID-19 pandemic situation, many healthcare providers are not seeing patients in person. They are electing to see their patients via telephone and video conferencing, including the use of smartphone, computer, and tablets. Working collaboratively with the association, we were able to draft an agreement, a memorandum of understanding that will allow for this feature to be made available for our employees. Obviously, the goal of this is to increase and improve the level of access for our employees to medical professionals during this difficult time and situation. It is also designed to be a non-cost prohibitive option for our employees. and also, if it is successful, could eventually result in potential savings for the district to possibly maybe keep this feature going beyond the current memorandum of understanding. So at this time, the administration would like to recommend that the Board of School Directors approves the memorandum of understanding between the Boyertown Area School District and the Boyertown Area Education Association for telemedicine care.
Daroff moves.
All right, Ms. Deroff, do we have a second?
McWhorter seconds.
Ms. McWhorter seconds. Any comments or questions on this memorandum? I don't see any hands up. Is anybody trying to get on? All right, again, hearing none, we'll move to the vote.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Moving on to item G, personnel. At this time, the administration would like to present for board approval the following resignations: 1 professional and 1 classified, 2 professional employees for family medical leave and leave of absences, and 1 classified employee for uncompensated leave. At this time, we recommend the Board of School Directors approve the personnel items as presented.
All right, do we have a motion?
Denon moves.
Daroff
All right, Ms.
seconds.
Denon. Ms. Denon, seconded by Ms. Deroff. Any comments or questions on personnel? All right, I don't see any hands raised. We will move to the vote.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
Yes.
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
That concludes the superintendent's report and itemized agenda.
All right, thank you. And next we have old business.
We do have old business tonight. This is a new
I
thing
believe
for
there
me. Yep, new thing for me. So if I do anything wrong, Mr. Sultanic, please correct me. On the March 24th meeting, we tabled the audit proposal. I have since gotten a revised proposal with revised language, which addresses the question that was proposed at the meeting on March 24th. We did discuss that at the Finance Committee meeting in April 14th. And the majority of the committee was okay to move this forward. So what we need is a motion to take the tabled item off of the table. And then, Mr. Sultanic, this is probably where I'll need a little guidance. I don't know if we can do, if we need a motion to amend the item with the new language and then a vote on that.
But what you can do to simplify it is to do it all at once, assuming that there's enough board support to do that. Be a motion to bring the auditing services proposal back on the table and to address the amended auditing services proposal as presented.
Neiman will make that motion.
All right, do we have a second?
Brophy will second.
All right, Mr. Brophy seconds. So at this point, do we open this up for comments and questions, Mr. Sultanic?
Yes.
All right. All right, I don't see any hands raised. Does anybody want to speak or ask any other questions about this topic? All right, seeing none at this time, we'll vote on this as moved.
Ms. Hogan,
Yes.
Mrs. Denon,
Yes.
Mr. Brophy,
Yes.
Ms. Neiman,
Yes.
Mrs. McWhorter,
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove,
yes,
Mr. Hemingway,
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff,
Yes.
Mr. Foose.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right, so I believe that's all for old business.
Yes, it is.
Thank you, and we'll move to public comment 2, which, as was stated earlier, we did not have anybody registered for public comment this evening. So we will move to board comment at this time. And I did have a board member reach out that they wanted to make some comments about a community member who we recently lost. And if everybody would be so willing, I'd like to propose that we allow those comments without them being on the clock per our policy, and have this be just a separate comment for them to make. Does anybody object to that?
I have no objections.
All right, if there are no objections, I'd ask if that board member would like to make their comments.
Okay. Should I do it now?
Yes.
It's with great sadness to report the passing of Mr. Ken Ellis on Saturday, the last of the big three. Ken, along with both two other community members, Don Specht and Bud Garber, built Bear Stadium. Ken was also very involved with the sports complex. Please keep Mr. Ellis's family and friends in your thoughts and prayers at this sad time. I had a big speech planned tonight, but because of constraints and policies in place, I'm unable to do so. So go to the Boyertown American Legion baseball website and you will see a full story of Mr. Ellis, his accomplishments, and his dedication to our community. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So at this point, we'll proceed with board comment as we normally would. So I'll look at our panel here. All right. I don't see anybody's hand raised at this time. Does anybody want to get in the queue? All right, seeing and hearing none, I did want to, I appreciated the sentiment and the kind words that were put out there. I saw this passing as well, and know that Mr. Ellis was intimately involved with the baseball stadium, which is something that was a big part of my upbringing here in the Boyertown community. It's obviously central to our community. And I looked up an article from the 30th anniversary of Bear Stadium. And I thought this quote really stood out, and I wanted to share this because I think it is really relevant today. So in a story about the 30th anniversary of the stadium and the work that was done to get the Bear Stadium built, this article said, "The story of Bear Stadium has not diminished one bit in its 30-year history. It is a long story that illustrates the incredible, long-forgotten ability of Americans to forget their own interests, work together, and help each other. In the specific case of the Bear Stadium story, the Boyertown community acted in a similar but proactive manner. I thought that was an important quote to share. I think it's part of our Boyertown legacy, and we certainly honor Mr. Ellis and in his passing and all that those that came before us have contributed. All right, so if there are no other comments at this time, we will move to the next item, which is upcoming meetings. And our upcoming meetings are listed on the district website. I don't believe there is one currently scheduled for next week, next Tuesday. However, please check district communications, as that is subject to change given the fluidity of the current situation. So just check
Mr.
the web.
President,
Yes, sir.
with that comment, I just wanted to remind the board members of the email they received this morning that had several items that we will, in the coming week, need to have addressed because they impact the planning process for Mrs. Pitts. So please, if you have not, make sure, I think it was at 9:22 this morning, sent with the key items and questions highlighted in yellow that they need to make sure they look at so that we can get some guidance for her to move forward with some key decisions and consideration for the board.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, so looking for a motion to adjourn.
Neiman moves.
All right,
Daroff
Neiman
seconds.
moves. Daroff seconds. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night. Stay healthy.
Good night.